sometimes we sing together, and one nursing home, the other one I sing to them when they're having lunch. It's sort of like in a bar, actually. So your theme for the month is grace, and I wanted to tackle that on the 5th and last Sunday of the 5 Sundays in January, and I'm going to dedicate this sermon today to my dad. He would have been 111 today. And he never quite understood the core of what I was after in terms of my ministry, but he respected and loved me. And he could be seen, it has been told, reading my sermons on the John late at night. So this one's for Harold Alexander. And I brought some of my books. If any of you want to take something home from my heart and soul. What I'm sharing today on grace is essentially in this book, Theology Ablaze, where I tackle fearlessly 27 theological topics. What was I thinking? And I've got to say that grace is probably among the toughest for Unitarian Universalists to deal with. And so I'm not going to waste a word today. I'm going to try to stick closer than I usually do to the text, because I don't want to fumble. This is a very fragile, delicate journey we're on today, talking about grace. To speak of grace is to say that finally our lives are not our own. That we're not only the recipients of an existence that we didn't create, but a gift we don't deserve. We're statistical miracles, you and I. Now that doesn't mean that we aren't stokers of our singular flaming chalice. For me, it's a marriage of grit and grace. Grit and grace, grace and grit, all the way home. But grace reminds us that we're even more those whose lives are crafted by human and divine forces beyond our creation, control, even our comprehension. In Middle Eastern languages, the word for rain, how fitting for us Southern Californians who have undergone our rain bursts. The word for rain and grace are the same, suggesting invisible gifts falling on our ground, enriching the soil of our souls. But there's no more slippery or unnerving theological concept for Unitarian Universalists to address than grace. Slippery because grace is a blessing, as I said, beyond our grasp, beyond our deserving. And it's unnerving because grace is beyond our achievement. To complicate matters, grace appears too mystical for our rationalist side, right? And too passive for our activist bent. Nonetheless, this most ticklish theological virtue has been gaining coinage in our realm. If you look across the land and the kinds of sermons that are being delivered, kind of worship themes that are being produced in our congregations, such as here, grace is making a comeback. And I want to talk about grace first as a theological category, and then as a graciousness, as an ethical way of being in the world, and then gracefulness, we talk about dancing, and then the saving grace of humor, without which we don't make it through the others. And then I want to weave in humility, because I think humility is the closest kin to grace we probably have in the theological lexicon. Now, for classic Christianity, the source of grace appears rather clear-cut, doesn't it? An omnipotent God breaks into human life and saves us from transgression and alienation. Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace, the title of probably the most popular American hymn ever produced. You know some of the story, I'm sure, but I want to rekindle your interest in the story. John Newton, 18th century English poet and clergy. He was also a slaveholder. And he was converted to Christianity. So he changed from being a slaveholder to resisting slavery to the utmost during his remaining days. It's very important to know where hymns come from. We had Bernice Reagan in our San Diego congregation. We had Issei Barnwell, part of Sweet Honey in the Rock. And Issei had come back from Africa and was doing a workshop. In fact, she's buying a home in Africa. It's split her living in the United States and Africa. And she did a workshop for us, and she said, you've got to remember where the spirituals come from. For example, there is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. Who were the wounded? The slaves. To heal the sin-sick soul. Who's the sin-sick soul? The slaveholder. Everybody must be addressed in a gracious universe. And we often, Beth and I were talking about, okay, there's in the hymn book, there's two verses or two renditions. You can either say, it saved a soul like me or saved a wretch. It's tough for Unitarian Universalists to say wretch. But I've sung in too many nursing homes. I'm a forest dweller myself in the Hindu tradition of 75 years and above. To know too well the evil that I've done, the wrongdoings that I've delivered. You can call it what you want to call it, but you are it and so am I. And there's nobody in the nursing home that's fooled by trying to insert and somehow sing soul. But I'll let you make that choice when we come to sing it. But just know that your soul, and we all have one, is both wretched and beautiful. And you pay dues on both sides of that street. And so do I. A few years ago, I was on the Commission on Appraisal, and we were trying to review our purposes and principles. And due, unfortunately, to some procedural blocks, we never made the changes most people across the country wanted. Where's beauty? Beauty ain't in there. Didn't make the cut. And how about death? Are we immortal? Can we, as W.H. Auden said, consent to die? And evil's missing too, except when we're combating the structures of evil as if they're always out there. Until you've dealt with the evil inside your own soul, in the weaknesses, the flaws, the wrongdoings, the ways that I've broken the heart of my own family. And I recall that as we celebrate 2 of the birthdays this afternoon when I go back to San Diego. Until I've internalized that and made peace with that and own that, my going out in the streets to combat the structures of evil allows me to feel like I'm not complicitous. It's inside and it's outside. You got to work on both sides. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretched soul like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. At least I'm getting found. Was blind, but now I can see better. So wherever grace comes from, it comes usually by surprise. Rarely on cue. Such grace, startling, surprising, not of our own doing. We cannot program grace. I mean, you can set up the table, you can grind and prepare the way, and maybe the gracious will come into the presence of that protest or that love event or that healing of an irreconcilable bond. Maybe grace will arrive, maybe it won't. You need to prepare the soil. You need to be a toiler or a grinder. I know all of that, but it points to the sheer blessedness of existence, and that rain comes as a gift beyond our own accomplishment. I'm a theological hybrid. I'm a naturalistic theist. For me, the lurking places, I love that phrase from Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of our forebears. The lurking places of the divine for me are more in the natural realm. I'm not waiting for some supernatural bolt or some breakthrough like that. It's happening in the daily events and struggles. Remember, Kazantzakis said another word, another name for God is struggle. And Gandhi, on his last words, God is struggle. And through service and the natural world. So the divine, whenever it comes into my life, usually comes through the natural and the human realm. A stranger walks into your life and a friendship blossoms. A piece of music is first heard by the chance spinning of a radio dial, or because you happen to be in a service in Costa Mesa and you heard a piece of music you want to take home with you. You want to ensoul that music. You want it to come alive in your life. Grace dumbfounds us in modest ways and hidden places. I drove up to LA from San Diego at Burbank Airport to meet my brother who flew down from Oakland. I said, Phil, you're 78, I'm 75. You've known me longer than anybody else in the family. And I got some things I want to connect and share with you. We're very close, emotionally and spiritually close. But I'm the initiator, I'm the sentimentalist. And if it's going to happen to get together face to face, not just Facebook, not Skyping, not just letters, not just emails, not just phone calls, face to face, eyeball to eyeball, level glance, active gaze with my brother, I have to initiate it. And I drove up to Burbank, and for 2 nights, we drove around the area where we grew up and said, there is where, yeah. What was her name? Mary Schmidt, yeah. And that's where you had me arm wrestle Jerry Nash. And that's where Mom fell down and broke her arm on the street there. On and on the stories. I brought up some of the songs that my brother had written years back, and I said, I want you to serenade me tonight in the bedroom, and I want you to sing those songs to me. And we talked about who's going to speak and whose memorial and what you might want to hear from the longest term bond. But we don't get that both ways, do we? I think about that a lot as I've lost 2 of my best male friends in this last year. One he didn't want to go on any longer. So it was a blessing. And the other was a harsh, sudden death at 62. And he was supposed to speak in mine. It was already planned. I'm older. Grace surprises us, doesn't it? In the morning when I get up, after I go to the bathroom, come back, that's about the 2nd or 3rd time, right? I stand, and I usually go in the other room because Carolyn sleeps later than I do, and I don't want to disrupt her flow. And I do a Nepalese body prayer, and it's something like this. We won't go into all of it, but it's from my friend Orlando Bronoia, who died 2 years ago. Paul, and you plant yourself, and your first motion is confirmation. Your hands are out like this, and you say, universe, you deserve to be here. It's a joy that you're alive. That's confirmation of your existence. And then there's prayer from E. Gratitude. My hands up like this in the form of a chalice, and I will receive all the difficulties and the delights of the day with which I choose to then bless my excursions. Confirmation, gratitude, reception of everything that comes your way. Too often we go to the shelf at self-care Barnes & Noble, and it's all about how it makes you feel better and look better. Not much on do better, but anyway, look and feel better. But the point is, the difficulties. Love means holding to the difficult, said Rainer Rilke. Love means holding to the difficult. So I want to bring in everything that happens to me during the day, and then I will use all of that fodder to bless and make my excursion on that 24-hour jaunt more precious. And I want to remind us of the story of the prodigal son. There have been a lot of prodigal sons and prodigal daughters in this room. I know I've been one. And there have been prodigal fathers and prodigal mothers, right? Aunts and uncles and cousins, in-laws, outlaws, we're all in there. You can't escape either both the needing of forgiveness or the delivery of forgiveness. But here's the younger son seeking an early inheritance, and he goes off and he squanders it in loose living. I mean, he really wasted it. Then he sheepishly, even ashamedly, returns asking for forgiveness, but expecting his just deserts. Instead, who's out there? His father rushes out to greet him, and note that the text says, when he was yet at a distance. That's real bridging. That's forgiveness. That's reconciliation. That's Desmond Tutu. Rejoices in his son's return and sets the village to celebration. Not just sort of a private thing with the son. Okay, we'll take care of it. No, that's a cause for celebration for the whole village. Let us eat and make merry, for this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Echoes of amazing grace. The son is accepted not because of any demonstrated worthiness. He's forgiven, upheld, and accepted for who he is. He's just accepted, no questions asked, no justifications required. That's the way of acceptance. That's the way of a loving universalist God. That's the way of grace. It may also come in the presence of adversity. We make a patently wrong decision and have to pay a price, or we invest too much reliance in a person or cause and are disappointed, even burned, or there is a great loss. How can we call that grace? Now, there exists a line beyond which I, at least, cannot. I refuse to call the death of a child anything but tragic. I will not name collective evil, whether Holocaust or war, a sign of grace. Nonetheless, there are some dislocations and travail, good word, travail, through which, while grace may initially appear as a stern, painful teacher, it ultimately produces healing. You know that, and I know that. Living in this state of grace, what else is there to do but be a gracious person? And I want to talk about being gracious. It's the ethical response to being loved. Beyond our deserving, beyond our anything. I said it's our response, it's not a repayment. You can't repay the creation for the unspeakable gift of existence. But you can make payments. think of the story, Till Evans. Some of you probably remember Till, if you nod your head, Till Evans, yeah. Was a renowned religious educator in our Southern California ranks and in the Bay Area as well. And I'll never forget, she tells stories about children interacting with one another. She calls them hallelujah stories. And here's one. Chloe was 1.5 years old with dark hair and a solemn face. She came into the gathering service one morning and said she didn't need to wear a diaper anymore. Everyone gave her a rah-rah. She sat down next to Blythe, who was 2, a blonde, frail-looking and rather contained child. Blythe had a pacifier in her mouth. At one point, Chloe leaned over to Blythe, took the pacifier out of her mouth very delicately, and leaned forward and kissed her on the mouth. Then she put the pacifier back in Blythe's mouth. No word was spoken. You don't program that. This is where humility comes into the equation. Humility in all of its etymological kin. Look at all this stuff. Humaneness, humanness, humor, humus. They're all rooted in the sensibility of grace. As our 7th principle reminds, we are neither the whole of nor extraneous to creation, but a critical cog. We're partners in the interdependent web. We're not central. It's not about us. But we're involved. We're integral contributors. We're co-partners. Incredible. You and I get to be co-partners in the cosmic flow that we didn't even get started. And we're spending so many years here passing through, and we get to be partners. Noble yet humble passage and mission. My favorite passage from either the Hebrew or Christian Bible, and there's a lot of good stuff in there and there's a lot of bad stuff in there. But Micah 6:8. What does the Eternal One require of you? Not just hope to get from you. It's in about a, optional test. This is what's required of you during your stay on earth. What does the Eternal require of you but to do justice? Not just think about it, not just envision it, not just put it on a mug or a car or a sign. To do it in the most difficult of places and times. It could be this afternoon. And to love mercy or love kindness, to do justice and to love kindness or mercy, they're both core. And to walk humbly with your understanding of God. That's the literal Hebrew translation. Your understanding, not somebody else's. Don't try to second rate or follow or heed or clone somebody else's version of what is ultimate. Your understanding of the divine. And to walk humbly with, not behind. Not in our faith, we don't walk behind the eternal. We don't walk ahead. We're partners. We're partners. And that's what I want to move on to, being graceful. Dancing. It was years when we came out west from Davenport, Iowa. The Twyla Tharp, remember the modern dance troupe, Twyla Tharp group? And they were exceptional dancers who performed intricate and exquisite, stylized and expressive movements. They were all over the place. It was very intriguing because our daughter was trying to shape dance into her existence, and it was kind of it took her in a lot of different directions, but it expanded her horizons to see Twyla Tharp. They didn't embody artistic perfection. They made noticeable blunders and mistakes and were occasionally quite uninspiring. Like you and I would be if they said, okay, you guys, you go up there now. You get on the table. They were graceful, but they were human. They danced not for perfection, not even for performance. They danced primarily to pay witness to the belief that joy is at the center of creation. Dancers declare that our minds and bodies are animated by inner joy, that inner juice, passion. The time that I spend with children and youth, I'm always going for the juice in the child, bringing my juice to match theirs and where that might take us individually and collaboratively. I want them to know I'm awake, I'm vital, and this guy's still got more stuff to pour forth. Dancers remind us not to fuss and feud as our congregations are prone to do, about who's leading, who's following in the ministerial dance. Wrong route to take. It's the dance that matters. And sometimes you're leading, and sometimes you're following, and sometimes you're to the side, and sometimes you're behind, and sometimes you're ahead. The dance is what matters. The dance of marrying joy and justice on the path to fashioning a semblance of a beloved community. And then it takes humor, doesn't it? Saving grace of humor. I'm still a serious guy. The playful is harder for me to come by. I play music, I dance, I play games, I do magic, but still being zany and foolish and clumsy is tough for me. Carolyn's helped me with that in our 44 years. It just came easier to her. I don't know, being the only girl and 3 brothers, whatever. I don't know. Let's not try to figure it out. Sense of humor. To laugh at and with ourselves. To be cut down to size and emerge liberated rather than decimated. Being cut down to size. You aren't all that you thought you were. We've been fooled. Love is trickier or more tragic than bargained for. Humor reminds us, all of us, that while it goes about cleansing then restoring our spiritual system, we've got to be cleansed and restored. There's the Apache myth where the Creator grants human beings the ability to run, talk, and to look. But then the Eternal One was not satisfied until earthlings were graced with the capacity to chuckle. It's not enough to run and talk and look. That's good stuff. But you got to be able to chuckle at yourself and at others, and even at the most tragic of situations sometimes. That doesn't mean you end with the chuckle. You got to resist, and you got to create a marriage of joy and justice. But don't be a drab crusader. It won't do. We're better than that. Laughter. The alternative to laughter is arrogance, is idolatry, and sometimes violence. Look at the Inquisitions. Look at the heresy trials. Look at the witch hunts. Look at the holy wars. There's sufficient testimony to the stark presence of sanctity without humor. Okay, we're frail, we Unitarian Universalists. Oh, we are frail. And it won't make it back in about our own personal wrongdoing and complicity in evil. Won't be make it back into the purposes and principles during my time on earth, probably. But someday it might, along with forgiveness, along with mortality, along with beauty, and some other stuff missing too. But here we are, we're graced creatures on the road toward being gracious, and we're off flowing with gracefulness. We carry forth, we carry on, we laugh heartily, we laugh nervously, we laugh because we're unmasked. We're laughing with profound joy, for despite everything, we know one sure thing: we're loved. That's the Universalist gospel. Don't try to debate it on the streetcar. Don't try to argue it with a cousin. Just know you're loved. And then know the best way to respond to that love is a love and response. To love and response. We're moving on to something else. I'm not sure what it is, but it's in here. It's Amazing Grace.